Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, December 31st, 2024. First thing, I'm not going to do a show tomorrow. I'm going to take the night off, New Year's Eve night off. I'm still going to do my writing and everything, so the page at antiwar.com will be updated, but I'm just going to take the night off and hang out with my wife for New Year's Eve. But then I'll be back the next day, so there will be a Thursday, Friday show, just taking the one day off. It'll probably be a little slow anyway, but I just wanted to inform you of that for those who don't make it to the end of the show. All right, the top story at antiwar.com today, the U.S. announces $6 billion in new aid for Ukraine. So the Biden administration on Monday announced nearly $6 billion in new aid for Ukraine as it's determined to escalate this proxy war as much as possible before Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. So the aid includes $3.4 billion in direct budget support, and this is a form of aid meant to pay for Ukrainian government services, salaries, and pensions, and it covers other types of spending. I know in the past it's been used to subsidize small Ukrainian businesses and farmers. So Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said in a statement, quote, "Economic assistance from the United States and our allies is crucial for Ukraine's ability to defend its sovereignty and achieve a just peace by maintaining the critical government services that underpin its brave fight," end quote. So that the U.S. has given Ukraine tens of billions of dollars in this form of aid, which again funds government services, things like healthcare, pensions, and this is, going to a notoriously corrupt government. It's money that just goes directly to the government. Yellen said that the $3.4 billion was the last remaining funds for budgetary aid from the 2024 Ukraine Security Supplemental Appropriations Act that was packed into the $95 billion foreign military aid bill that Biden signed into law back in April. So on top of the $3.4 billion in the budget aid, Ukraine is also receiving nearly $2.5 billion in military aid from the U.S., which includes a $1.22 billion, I was going to say loan. It's not a loan. $1.22 billion for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. And this is a program that allows the U.S. to purchase weapons for Ukraine. And the remaining military aid is being provided using the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which lets the U.S. ship weapons straight from U.S. military stockpiles. So the Biden administration is just dumping more weapons into Ukraine, even though it's become very clear Ukraine is no path to victory on the battlefield here. But that doesn't matter to them. They just want to keep this war going. And they're even pressuring Ukraine to lower the conscription age and start conscripting 18-year-olds. Antony Blinken has even said that publicly. I mean, that's really shameful stuff, trying to convince a country to recruit teenagers to send into an unwinnable war. But the Pentagon put out a list of the new military aid. It's a lot of the typical stuff that the U.S. has been sending. It includes munitions for the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System. That's an air defense system. Hawk air defense munitions, Stinger missiles, drones, counter-drone systems, ammunition for the HIMARS rockets, artillery shells, air-to-ground munitions, more drones, Javelin and AT-4 anti-tank systems, tow missiles, small arms, demolitions equipment, medical equipment, and spare parts, maintenance, training, things like that. So a very big shipment of weapons heading to Ukraine. And again, this is what the Biden administration is doing in its final days, is prioritizing shipping weapons and spending all this money on this proxy war. And it goes to show, we try to figure out what Trump is actually going to do when it comes to this war, but he was the candidate who ran against it. He explicitly ran on ending it. Whether or not that's actually going to happen, we'll see. But, that means the American people voted to end this war. but that doesn't matter to the Biden team. All right, so the next one here, I left up one from yesterday about Russia and Trump. Russia not being too happy about these ideas being floated by the Trump transition team. But the next one here, Haaretz says, stop attacking Gaza hospitals. So on Monday, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz published an editorial calling for the Israeli military to stop targeting hospitals in Gaza that was titled, Leave Gaza's Hospitals Alone. And as a lot of people pointed out when I posted this on Twitter, it's a little too late considering Israel has destroyed so many hospitals in Gaza already. But anyway, I think this is important because of the things that they say about the raid on the Kamal Adwan hospital. And this came out just a few days after the Israeli military destroyed that hospital in Beit Lahia, northern Gaza. They forced the hospital workers and patients to clear out, set fire to the facility. They killed at least 5 staff members in this raid, medical staff. And they've killed other staff, before. The hospital's been under attack, under siege for over 2 months, basically. And the hospital's director, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, he's been arrested by Israeli troops. And now he's believed to be at the notorious Seti Timon torture prison. This is where those, there's been reports of rape and just horrific torture. That's where they send the director of the hospital. So the IDF, the Israeli military, claimed that it arrested 250 terrorists at Kamal Adwan. But this editorial from Haaretz points out that the only evidence Israel put out to back up this claim was a picture. I can't even believe that they actually put this out. It was a picture of 2 pistols and a knife. That's their evidence. I would think they would at least fake something, if that's really what they found. You just show that's your evidence that you took out a Hamas command center, 2 pistols and a knife. I have more than that in this house. It's just a complete joke. So the editorial says, quote, this meager haul does the opposite of supporting the IDF's claims. For 2 pistols and a knife, you don't evacuate dozens of patients and doctors from a hospital and march them in their underwear on a cold night before the cameras in order to humiliate them, end quote. This is a picture from Kamal Adwan from earlier this month of a girl who was wounded by an Israeli attack being treated. This is who they cleared out of this hospital. This is who has been under siege for these past 2 months. The editorial acknowledges that the real purpose of the destruction of hospitals in North Gaza is ethnic cleansing. Since early October, the IDF has placed this city, Beit Lahia, and as well as Beit Hanun and Jabalia, under a total siege and ordered all civilians to leave under the threat of death, whether by bombing, shooting, or starvation. And the IDF has also been demolishing every building in sight, so Palestinians have nowhere to return. So here you have, again, an Israeli newspaper, and Haaretz, they publish they have their English language site and paper, and they have their Hebrew language site and paper, and their editorials are published in both. It's not like this is just for an American audience. This is for an Israeli audience as well. You don't see these kind of editorials from the New York Times, the Washington Post. You see them instead justifying this stuff. I saw the New York Times story about this raid, and they said, it's actually necessary to strip down terror suspects. They actually said that in their coverage of this attack on a hospital. But anyway, so this editorial says, quote, it is fair to assume that the deliberate damage to hospitals in Gaza has a different purpose. It appears that as part of the ethnic cleansing campaign of the Northern Strip, during which the army destroyed almost all the area's housing and infrastructure to prevent the return of hundreds of thousands of those expelled from there, it was decided to destroy the hospitals as well, end quote. The editorial noted that that the Geneva Convention affords a special status to hospitals during wartime. It reads, quote, the presence of small arms and ammunition in a hospital does not justify attacking it, nor does the presence of enemy fighters who are hospitalized there, end quote. That's another thing Israel's done in the West Bank. They've gone into hospitals disguised as Palestinians or patients or doctors. In one case a few months ago, they went in, I think it was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad guy who was injured, getting treatment in the hospital, and they went in and they shot and killed him. But anyway, so one thing I always point to when we're talking about this is back in October, 99 American healthcare workers who volunteered in Gaza, they published an open letter to President Biden, and they said they saw no evidence of militant activity. This is what the letter says. Quote, the 99 signatories to this letter spent a combined 254 weeks inside Gaza's largest hospitals and clinics. We wish to be absolutely clear. Not once did any of us see any type of Palestinian militant activity in any of Gaza's hospitals or other healthcare facilities, end quote. So anyway, the next story here, Israeli attacks kill 27 more Palestinians in Gaza. So Gaza's health ministry said Monday that Israeli attacks killed at least 27 Palestinians and wounded 149 in the previous 24-hour period. The health ministry's numbers only include the dead and wounded Palestinians brought to hospitals and morgues. They don't account for those missing under the rubble or the indirect deaths caused by the Israeli siege. And also on Monday, another baby died because of the cold weather, marking the 6th time within a week that an infant died due to exposure in tent camps amid dropping temperatures and heavy rains. This is a picture from one of those tent camps in Deir al-Bala in central Gaza. Very heavy rain. You could see this guy's tent has been completely flooded. And you look at these tents and they're falling apart. There's holes in them. A lot of them are just tarps, basically, that they've put together. And, I've seen that to get like a rain flap for your tent. This one Palestinian journalist in Gaza said that costs like $300. They don't have the supplies, to fix their tents, to get new ones. It's just an absolutely dire situation for these Palestinian civilians sheltering in these tents. So the baby who died on Monday was the twin brother of the one who died a day earlier. The one who died on Monday, his name was Ali Al-Patron. He was 1 month old. He died after being brought to the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in central Gaza. And a day earlier, his twin brother, Juma, was found dead by their parents in a tent that they were sheltering in. And the twins were born 1 month premature. As I mentioned yesterday, they were born 1 month premature and could only spend 1 day in the nursery in the hospital since the hospitals are overwhelmed due to Israel destroying all the hospitals and the medical infrastructure. So again, imagine having a baby that premature and you got to leave the hospital. I mean, that's the thing that they do. Premature babies, they put them in the NICU. They put them under a heat lamp, basically. So instead of that, they're sent out into a tent with holes, and it's raining and cold. And this is all, it's just people have been living like this now for over a year. So the Israeli strikes continued across Gaza on Monday as well. One attack that I included in here was a bombing in Jabalia in northern Gaza that killed at least 4 Palestinians. And then there was some fighting. Hamas's military wing, the Qassem's brigades, they also claimed a major attack on Israeli troops in the Jabalia refugee camp, which has been almost completely destroyed by the Israeli military. The Qassem brigades claim that it eliminated 5 Israeli soldiers, but the IDF only confirmed the death of 1 soldier. They did say several others were wounded. But just the daily nightmare continues for Palestinians living in these conditions. All right, so the next one here, Palestinians die within days after abduction by the Israeli army. This article is from Middle East Eye. So 5 Palestinians from Gaza died in Israeli custody within the past day after being abducted by Israeli forces, a monitoring group said. The Palestinian Prisoners Club on Monday confirmed the deaths of 5 Palestinians taken from Gaza and held in Israeli prisons. These deaths follow warnings from 2 Palestinian monitoring groups about catastrophic conditions in Israeli jails after the deaths of 2 other prisoners. In a joint statement, the Ministry of Detainees and Ex-Detainees Affairs and the Palestinian Prisoners Society announced on Friday the deaths of these other 2 Palestinians. So this is, there's been 60, according to these groups, at least 60 Palestinians have died in Israeli custody, 60 in Israeli prisons. and there's been torture, all these reports, and not just, it's not just the Palestinians saying they're being tortured. There's been Israeli whistleblowers. There's all sorts of corroborating evidence about horrific torture and rape. And it's just, these prisons are, and this is something Ben-Gvir, who's the Israeli Minister of National Security, he's been bragging about, putting them in these horrific conditions and cutting off their food, giving them much less food. And so you see this many people dying in captivity. It's not a surprise. Disease is spreading in these places. All right, so the next one here, Ukraine's foreign minister meets with HTS leaders in Damascus. So Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha was in Damascus on Monday, and he met with Syria's de facto leader and other senior members of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the al-Qaeda offshoot that led the offensive to oust former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. So Ukrainian intelligence actually supported the HTS offensive against Assad by providing drones and drone operators weeks before the offensive was launched. And Assad was allied with Moscow and recognized the independence of the Donetsk and Luhansk republics in eastern Ukraine back in 2022. In response to that, Ukraine ended diplomatic relations with Damascus, so that Ukraine's foreign minister is saying they're ready to restore diplomatic relations. Doesn't matter that the new leaders of Syria are still designated by the U.S. as terrorists. Not that that's stopping the U.S. from giving them support. But Ukraine's ready to play ball here. They're hoping that these guys kick the Russians out of the country. So Sybiha, the Ukrainian foreign minister, he expressed hope that, quote, mutual recognition of territorial integrity and sovereignty will pave the way for the restoration of diplomatic relations, political dialogue, and the work of diplomatic institutions, end quote. So Assad Hassan al-Shibani, the foreign minister for the HTS-led transitional government, said that he hoped for strategic partnerships with Ukraine. He said, quote, certainly the Syrian people and the Ukrainian people have the same experience and the same suffering that we endured for over 14 years, end quote. So in a post on X, Ukraine's foreign minister said that he delivered a message from Zelensky to Syria's de facto leader, which of course is Abu Muhammad al-Jilani, or Ahmed al-Shara, which is his real name. That's what he's been going by. Abu Muhammad al-Jilani. Abu, as far as I understand it, it means son of. So his name means son of Muhammad. And then al-Jilani is a reference to the Golan Heights, which is where his family's from. He was born in Saudi Arabia, but his family's from the Golan Heights. So that was his name that he went by as an al-Qaeda leader. But now, since the takeover, he's wearing suits and he's going by his real name, Ahmad al-Shara. So Sybiha, the Ukrainian foreign minister, said that he, quote, personally conveyed the message of Ukraine's president to the Syrian people. We are with you and ready to assist in restoring normal life stability and food security, end quote. All right, so the next one here, foreign jihadists appointed to senior positions in Syrian military. So foreign jihadists have been appointed in senior positions in the new Syrian military, which is now led by HTS, as we mentioned. And again, the history of HTS, Jilani, who started al-Nusra Front, which was the al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. In 2016, he changed the name of al-Nusra, and he cut ties. He said he was cutting ties with al-Qaeda. He did it in a very polite way. He made clear they were on very good terms. Al-Qaeda said that they told him that they directed him to take this move. So that was 2016. And then in 2017, al-Nusra, it briefly changed its name. I forget what the name was after al-Nusra, but it was essentially the same group. So al-Nusra merged with several other Islamist factions to form HTS in 2017. And there's a lot of foreign fighters in HTS, but there's also these other groups that were in the Idlib province in the northwest that helped with the offensive, and they're getting appointed to some pretty senior positions in the Syrian military. Syrian sources told Reuters that the foreign fighters appointed to the military include Uyghurs, a Jordanian, a Turk, and an Albanian. An HTS source told the media outlet, quote, "This is a small token of recognition for the sacrifices Islamist jihadists gave to our struggle for freedom from Assad's oppression," end quote. So among the Uyghurs is Abdulaziz Dawood Khudaberdi. I probably butchered his name there, but he's the commander of the Turkestan Islamic Party, the TIP. He's the commander of their forces in Syria. And the TIP, they're Uyghur Muslims. Their stated goal is to create an Islamic state in China's western Xinjiang region. But they've been in Syria for a while now. They've had a presence in Syria for a while. And this guy is named as a brigadier general in the Syrian military, and 2 other Uyghur fighters were appointed as colonels. A Turkish citizen and a Jordanian citizen, they were also made brigadier generals. And Abdul Jashari, an Albanian fighter who was designated a terrorist by the U.S. Treasury Department, was also made a colonel. And HTS is still designated by the U.S. as a foreign terrorist organization, but Jelani had a $10 million bounty on his head, but that's being removed. Barbara Leaf, a high-level U.S. State Department official, just met with him recently, so they're all getting along for now. And we'll see it with the Trump administration, how they handle this situation. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. is concerned the new Syrian government is targeting minorities. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. After working to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad, the U.S. is now worried that the incoming government is targeting minority groups. Assad was deposed and replaced with Jelani, the founder of al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria. Axios reports that U.S. officials said, quote, "The U.S. expressed concern to the new foreign minister of the transitional administration in Syria, Assad Hassan al-Shabani, about reports of violent attacks by militant groups around the country in recent days. Several videos have emerged purporting to show jihadist militants affiliated with Jelani conducting attacks, including executions of minority groups in Syria." Max Blumenthal wrote on X, quote, "Social media is flooded with videos of HTS death squads torturing and executing Alawites," end quote. And I've seen some videos. It's tough to know what is what, but there's definitely a crackdown of minorities happening. And according to Axios, State Department envoy Daniel Rubinstein was dispatched to Damascus to meet with Shaibani, to meet with an HTS official here. So another U.S. meeting with this terrorist group, designated by the U.S. as a terrorist group. So there is, again, it's definitely, there's a crackdown happening, and it seems like it's getting worse and worse as time goes on here. And you have Jelani and HTS consolidating power. Jelani saying there's not going to be elections for 4 years. He's created this new government that's stacked with HTS guys who will be loyal to him. And then now you see the military being filled out with these Islamist fighters. So, the situation is not looking good. All right, so the next one here, Israeli army pushes deeper into Syria's Quneitra. So in southern Syria, this article is from Jason Ditz. So the regime change in Syria earlier this month was followed almost immediately by an Israeli invasion across the demilitarized zone line, separating Israeli-occupied Golan Heights from the rest of Syria. Since then, that invasion keeps getting deeper, with troops reportedly reaching the city of Quneitra on Monday. Israeli troops and tanks surrounded government buildings in the town of Al-Bath in the Quneitra countryside. I think I'm pronouncing Quneitra right. I meant to double check before this episode, but anyway, I failed to do that. So hopefully I'm not pronouncing it too poorly. But the Israeli troops ordered officials to withdraw from the area and claim that they were conducting inspections. So this is 2 miles beyond the buffer zone, the demilitarized zone that separates the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights from the rest of Syria. So they're continuing to push in more. And, Netanyahu says they're not going anywhere. They're going to stay in this territory, specifically Mount Hermon, through at least the end of 2025. I'm sure they have long-term plans here for a long-term occupation. All right, so the next one here, fighting between Turkey and Syrian Kurds escalates, 31 killed. So another one from Jason. Fighting has been raging off and on for weeks, but seems to be picking up intensity this weekend along the Syria-Turkey border, with Turkey and its affiliates fighting against the Kurdish SDF in and around Manbij. At least 31 combatants between the two sides have been killed since Sunday. Turkey had been building up forces along the border for weeks and has been talking up an offensive aimed at eliminating the Kurdish YPJ, the largest faction within the SDF. Though fighting isn't a new occurrence in the area, it has plainly gotten more aggressive on both sides since then. Turkey's allies in the Free Syrian Army have been attacking the SDF in several areas, with fighting around Manbij in the Aleppo province, but also incidents reported in the Raqqa province and Hasaka, artillery shelling there. So again, the fighting seems to be very heavy. The SDF carried out its own offensives, again, especially around Manbij and nearby Tishreen Dam. The SDF claims Turkey is setting up 2 military bases there inside Syrian territory and attacked and destroyed radar systems at those bases, along with at least one Turkish tank. So what's really incredible about this whole thing is that the Pentagon says the ceasefire between Turkey and the SDF is holding, when it's clearly not. And this is a very messy situation. The U.S. is in eastern and northeastern Syria. The SDF, it backs the SDF. They're the U.S. allies in this part of Syria, and they're also an enemy of Turkey, which is a NATO ally. Just a huge mess here. And the U.S. just seems to be like pretending like everything's fine. A few weeks ago, they said, there's been an extension to the ceasefire, but then the fighting was still happening. And then Turkey said there was no ceasefire. There's no extension to the ceasefire. So again, just a complete mess here. And there's 2,000 U.S. troops in eastern Syria. For years, the Pentagon said there was 900, but we recently learned that they were lying about that, and there is 2,000 U.S. troops in eastern Syria. So certainly in harm's way, and always the risk of getting involved in a bigger conflict in Syria. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Medea Benjamin and Nicholas J.S. Davies. Carter told Trump how to put America first, but will he do it? One from Ted Snyder, pretending your partners aren't who they are. One from Jonathan Cook, another expert report finds Israel is committing genocide. The West yawns. One from Jeffrey D. Sachs, how the U.S. and Israel destroyed Syria and called it peace. Our spotlight from James Carden, the untold story of Carter's fateful foreign policy. That's a good article. So Jimmy Carter died. I don't think I mentioned it in yesterday's show, but I'm sure you're all aware. He died at 100. And I like this Carden piece because it gets into the reality of what his foreign policy was like when he was president. And there was a lot of bad things about it that people aren't really aware of, specifically starting to send military support to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which they actually did before the Soviets invaded. And, they say it was a direct result of the U.S. support. But anyway, so go read that. Obviously, Jimmy Carter has done some very good things as well. He was, he has that book that Scott Horton's book, Provoked, was #1 in War and Peace on Amazon for weeks now, but it just got overtaken by Jimmy Carter's book. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's something about, it has apartheid in the title, and it's talking about the Israeli occupation of Gaza and the West Bank. Basically, the book is about there's not going to be peace until that occupation ends. So he's done some very, he's been very good on that issue over the years, but it's a little reality check about some of the things that happened when he was in office from Carden there. That's at the American Conservative. So please go check all that stuff out. Again, I'm going to skip no show tomorrow. Tomorrow night is New Year's Eve. I'm going to hang out with my wife instead of recording a podcast. But then I'll be back the next day. So going to skip a show, and then what? Then there'll be 2 more shows. So just 4 shows this week, taking a little time off for the new year. So this is the last show of 2024. Hopefully 2025 is better when it comes to peace in the world. Anyway, I will be back in a couple days. You could always support us by sharing this show. Tell your friend about antiwar.com. Like, subscribe, comment, follow us on social media. All that stuff helps out. I'll see you in a few days. Thanks for listening.